he'll ask me something about the human body, and I'll just say, isn't it incredible that like we're built of 4 molecules of DNA? Like that blows my mind that they can make us that can think like, why do molecules have this desire to come together? And I know that's kind of weird. It's kind of like a little maybe too touchy-feely, but I think my advice would be to do at least get one experience in a hospital setting or some sort of care field, and see if you like caring and being in and around healthcare stuff, because I think that's the best way to do it. I think that'll be the most a reasonable answer to give someone, as opposed to saying I didn't like studying proteins. So, yep.
Just kind of the second question from the bottom. What do you think the strongest and weakest part of your application is?
I think the strongest part of mine. The strongest part of mine, I think, was I had hospital experience. So I did an internship at Bay State Medical, working in the emergency room. I met patients, I interviewed them, and I think that was good. And I took that comparative healthcare class. I think those are my strongest points. My weaker points were my MCAT score wasn't that great, but you can recover from that. You can say I had trouble studying. There was this. You can come up. You don't want to be an excuse machine, but you can say, it's just not my strong suit. The other weakest part, I think, was going into the interviews. I hadn't practiced at all. So one of them was I sat down with a guy who had the same shirt, almost the same tie as me, and the same shirt. And I sat down, and he was like, nice shirt and nice tie. And I was like, oh, I know, I forgot my giant lizard suit at home. And there was like not even a laugh. Like the biochappers who know me get it, but like, which might say something that I'm a little weird like that. But like he just didn't laugh, and I was like, I couldn't recover from that. So I kind of sat there, and it was really awkward. Because you can't recover from a giant lizard suit comment. So for the rest of the interview, I was stumbling because he was like, what was your research one? In my head, I was like, my research was on proteins that I did at Genzyme, and then I was like, giant lizard. That was bad. So that's what I would say. Try to get a practice interview in at a med school before you go in for the real thing. Because the other thing that I'll just add, which shook me, was you go out and it's a good idea to buy a nice suit. Like an actual suit. I don't know what girls wear. I can't help you. I'm sorry. Like nice clothes. A skirt suit. You get a nice suit and you go in there and you're like, I look really good today. Like you're like, people are gonna see me and they're gonna be like, this is a medical student. He's dressed nicely. And you walk into. They usually do 20 students at a time. They orient you. Then you go off to your separate interviews. You walk into this room with 19 other prospective candidates who look exactly the same because it's pretty formal stuff, like maybe different colored ties, but they all have super nice suits on, and you're like, oh, I was foiled in my best attempt to look nice. So I think that's also what shook me a little bit. So you do have to I would do a practice orientation. Take the first medical school you go to, as an opportunity to learn what you can do better for other medical schools. Put it that way.
If you were to try to dissuade someone from going and tell them the worst parts about it, what would you say?
If I had to dissuade someone from going?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think one thing that I didn't appreciate quite was once you start it, you really are in it for the long haul. You can certainly stop after medical school and not do a residency, go and take your MD and do something else. But it is a big time commitment. And you have to really like medical school. And I've seen people that don't balance the life really well, and I've seen people who do it phenomenally well. And it's a challenge, I think. I hate trying to dissuade someone, but medical school does take up a lot of time, and it is a tricky part. You won't get to do everything you want to do. And there were a number of people I met who broke up with significant others going into it because they said, I don't have enough time. And people who lost touch with friends. And I've been really trying to keep up both of those. There are friends that I have said, I'll message them and I'll say, I haven't talked to you in a year and I'm so sorry. So it is a challenge and it does demand a lot of your time. I think that's the biggest drawback. I don't know if there's anything else though. If I do, I'll come back to it.
So I share an office space with a man who was a medical doctor and then an engineer. And what he says to me is that some people go to medical school and then go into research or something. But he says, I didn't like being around sick people. And you really have to know going in, are you a people person and are you willing to be around wanting to help heal people? Because if you don't like being around sick people, it just got him too depressed, too good stand anymore. He went and became an engineer and stuff.
And it's true. A friend of mine that I was telling you earlier who's brilliant with numbers, he has a touch of OCD. It's not bad. But it does make it a challenge when he goes into hospitals because he'll use like foam sanitizer like 50 times. Like every time he'll be like, hi, nice to meet you, foaming his hands while he's still talking, and then he'll do part of an exam, foam his hands again. And it is, and I said, you know, you don't like being around sick people. And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, what are you planning on doing? He's like, well, I'm going to do research. And I was like, I understand that, but I was like, you know, it's a struggle for you. And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, just wondering, but it's true, it is. And he said, one of the things he said to me was, he said, I didn't get enough experience working with sick people before medical school to appreciate that I really didn't like it. So, any more questions? Yes?
All your service and career-oriented volunteering before going into school, could you like describe what you did?
I did. I'll do it quickly because I don't want to. I mean, I won't try to bore you guys. I worked at Bay State Medical for a summer. I worked at Genzyme for a year and a half because it became my senior thesis. I think the most meaningful of this two that I could talk most about was the Bay State one because I liked it. Genzyme, it was nice, but it was not what I enjoyed. That's a good question. I did the mentoring, which I loved. I mean, do something you love in undergrad that you can show people. You can be like, I worked really hard at this because I loved it. I love being a biotech mentor, and that's why I feel so lucky to come back to talk to you guys because I think I missed the program a lot. And I know this seems kind of weird, but I worked in the bakery here for a long time. So, I mean, that was just, you got free food every day. I loved that. I gained probably 20 pounds working there, but it was awesome. And Dr. Hines maybe said the same thing, but I'd try different things, but find something to stick with that you love. And it's interesting. I mean, that kind of sounds weird, interesting to talk about, but something you can make interesting because you love it so much to someone else.
How well do you eat as a med school student?
It's a learning process. I eat well now. I eat okay now. I can do like chicken parm and stuff. The low point was my first couple weeks living there. I was making like a hamburger on my top of my stove, and I was like, this isn't hard. And like oil spill, or no, I'm sorry, I didn't put a lid on it or anything, but some oils heat up different, I don't know. They heat up differently. But the end result was I had a lava fountain of oil spewing. So I rushed out of my apartment onto the deck with this oil spewing everywhere and hot droplets standing everywhere. And I held it over the railing, and I was like, this is awful. And I thought to myself, I don't know how to cook. And it landed on my hands, and I kind of went like, ow! And the hamburger fell out and fell down into the bushes 3 stories below. And I kind of looked, and I was like, I'm having cereal tonight. And I went there, and then the next morning, I hear outside my window, I hear the people doing the shrubbery outside going, there's a hamburger in this bush. I just like closed my window, and I was like, not me. But it's, you order out a couple, for a while you order out a lot, and then you slowly learn to cook things. You learn to cook things, and you kind of stick with those sometimes. But a lot of times my roommate and I will make things together, and you can try to work that out to make things so you won't be making as many meals, or get something and then eat it, like do leftovers for a couple of days. So you learn what works for you, I think is the best way. Yeah?
You find you eat a lot healthier now that you've attended that school?
Oh, that's a good question. When you do anatomy, the general consensus is you start to eat healthier because you have to cut through people who are obese. And it's a messy experience, and it makes you appreciate that fat's kind of gross when there's a lot of it. And it's you also, and I mean that from a specifically medical standpoint as you're going through it. Like you're like, oh wow, there's fat around this person's heart. That's a little scary. You open up arteries and you say, wow, this artery feels like porcelain. You're like, this is gross. And not only that, but not every lecture, most medical school lectures have some analogy to food. So they'll be like, this is a diseased kidney. It looks like pizza. And you're kind of like, and they get this liver diseases that they call nutmeg liver. And you're kind of like, that's gross. And like lung diseases that they call caseating cheese lung. And you're kind of like seriously? Like this is just, and it's like, so it's, I don't know. I think it varies depending on the student. And I think you have to take the initiative to do it. But I think in general I eat better than I did here because it wasn't a swipe into a DC and eat all you can. And Franklin had some good French fries. So, I mean, I'll be the first to admit that. And there were good paninis in Worcester, right? Worcester? Okay, good.
About the finances, you said that it costs about $40,000, but $16,000 actually goes to the school.
Yes.
And then you get a check for $12,000 each semester.
Yeah.
Do you pay upfront $40,000?
No, so you don't pay anything at all if you're doing it too long. You can if your family has the money, or you have the money, you can take away whatever amount. But UMass basically says, here's a $40,000 loan to you. We're taking $16,000. Here's the $24,000 left to do whatever you want with it. If you want to give some of it back because you don't need it, that's fine.
And you pay interest on it.
Yeah, and you pay interest on it over 4 years. So I will probably graduate, to be honest, with a little over, probably $120,000 after I pay off all the interest and stuff.
So sorry, the tuition itself, if you can pay it off, you can pay it and then you pretty much have to take care of your own housing, is that it?
Yes, yeah. So you take care of your own housing, I mean, like gas expenses, because you do need a car at some points in medical school, especially second year. And especially third and fourth year too. You need one third and fourth year. You can get by the first 2 years. But then you take care of all your lifestyle expenses. So I have some friends who live at home, and they're going to graduate with like $40,000. Some of them are going to graduate with $10,000. If you go as an MD PhD student to UMass Medical, they pay you to be an MD PhD student. So you get like $8,000 a year, but you don't pay anything to go to the school. So if you can get by on that, it's awesome.
And on following up on that, is that a longer program though?
MD PhD, yes. For MD PhD, you do your 2 years of classes, you do 3 or 4 years of research, and then you do your 2 years of working in hospitals. So it's at least 7 years, at least, if not longer. So it's a long haul. I have friends who are doing it and they love it, but it's long. So I would take that under careful consideration. Yep.
Is there opportunities to travel while in medical school? Like
There-
if you want to do a clerkship in like Bellevue Hospital in New York, could you do that?
There are. Bellevue, like New York hospitals, there would be. You could probably try to get a summer thing there. During the year, I don't know. UMass is big on international stuff though. So if you're like, I want to go to Mexico to practice medicine there, or I want to go to, there are women in certain Southeast Asian countries who just, to deliver their baby, they just stand there and deliver their baby. And you can be there and do that. Like, and UMass will do whatever you want to do if you tell them what you want to do. Like, so it's really cool for the international. Yeah.
And you pay the same to go there if you wanted to do something like that? Or do you have to pay additional for that?
I don't know.
Somewhere else?
That's a good question. I don't think it's more. I believe they factor it into your tuition, but you still have to pay for it like out of the $16 stipend, like the actual trip to some extent. But they also will provide you with a good stipend to go there too, so it's not that bad.
Well, would you say you have one of your greatest life moments at UMass?
Yes, I would say talking with that. He was asking if I had one of my greatest life moments, and I'd have to stick with that patient that I talked with. The other thing that I've been following around is a Catholic priest who's been dying of liver cancer, and that's been a moving experience because his faith. There's a lot of spirituality in medical school, more than I thought. There was going to be, and being not just because I'm following a priest. I mean that's obvious, but there's a lot of people who struggle with that, and being with him has really helped me a lot with that. And so I think being able to follow him, that's through the Navigator program. You can do programs if you want to. It's a hard thing to do, but you can do programs following dying patients. And it's extremely moving and will probably be one of your best life experiences in your first 2 years of medical school. So it's pretty impressive. Yeah.
If you're going to take a year off, what would you recommend doing?
Anything. I mean, I do something, but there's someone in my class who did bartending for 2 years, and he got in because he was energetic about it. He said, I've been bartending. He was able to, he said, I've learned medicine. I talked with doctors while I was bartending. People have done masters. I'd be careful doing a master's because if you do a master's, you may be so tired of school by the time you get to medical school, you're like, I don't want to. There's actually a lot of people in my grade who just traveled the world and they worked different jobs, did things like that, did trips to Africa and worked there. And if you can make that experience in your interview that's worth hearing about and saying like, this is how it impacted me and why I want to do medicine, you can do pretty much anything besides maybe Xbox 360 and like get a meaningful experience out of it. Yeah.
Do most medical students have jobs too?
No, almost no one has a job during the year. They'll give you jobs the summer between first and second year, but besides that, I don't know of anyone else who actually works because it is a pretty time-consuming thing. I know a couple people who do a little bit of part-time, but not much.
So what is the grossest thing you've seen at medical?
That's a good question. 1 second to just clear my throat for a sec. Probably the grossest thing was the patient that I was talking to, the Catholic priest, is dying of liver cancer. And earlier this year, a couple of months ago, I had accompanied to him a whole bunch of appointments. I went to his primary care one time, and the primary care did a physical. And he said, Let me make sure I get this right. It's embarrassing, I can't remember this. My right foot is bothering me. And we looked at it, nothing wrong with it. I saw him 2 days later, I followed him to a different appointment. They said, my foot's still bothering me, and I got a small sore the size of a pencil eraser on it. So I said, okay, well, we have an appointment in 2 days for you to get a paracentesis. That's where they pull fluid out of your belly, because you just get overloaded, so it just fills up your the space around your intestines. So we went to the hospital that 2 days later, and I checked it with his primary care, and the primary care said, does he want to come in and see it? The guy said, no, it's not that bad, and the primary care put him on an antibiotic anyway. So he came in for this procedure, and he was sitting down. I said, how's your foot? And he said, well, I'm diabetic, so I can't really feel it. He said, the last time I checked, it was the size of an eraser. And his sister checked it too, and she said, yeah, 2 days ago it was the size of an eraser. So I said, well, I'll check it now. So I pull off his shoe, and the sock is green. And I'm like, oh, okay. And the surgeon later asked me to explain it for a medical record, and she was like, so what did you smell when it came off? And I was like, fecal matter and yeast, like old yeast and fecal matter. And so I pulled off the shoe, and I almost vomited. I will be completely honest. Like, my eyes welled up, and I almost vomited. And the nurse was like, you better take off the sock. And I was kind of like, So she was nice, though, but I took off his sock, and his whole bottom of his foot was rotting. And it was just, stuff was there was just, rotting tissue doesn't bleed, but there was rotting vessels falling out. You could see to his bones in some places, and it smelled awful. And I literally, and so he actually got an emergency amputation later that day, because they couldn't, the surgeon said, you know what, well look, I don't think I'm going to be able to save the foot. And I went into the surgery with him, and she cut it open, and it was rotting all the way up into his ankle. And it's called necrotizing fasciitis. It's a flesh-eating bacteria. And the problem was he was diabetic, he didn't have good circulation. But and I'm assuming you guys want to hear about this. I apologize if anybody has weak stomachs, but she opened the foot, it was rotting. She said, wow, this stinks. And I said, yeah, try being the person who was this close when you opened it. And then the nurse, who had a wonderful sense of humor, she's leaning over, she goes, oh, looks like MRSA. And I was like, great. And I have my hands all over it, and I'm like smelling the foot, and I'm like, and she's like, yeah, it's probably immune to all antibiotics. And I was like, great. But then, she did the surgery, and she said, she opened the foot, and it was rotting inside. It was like, I won't go into food analogies. And she said, we have to take it off. So they did what's called a guillotine incision, where they literally just take a barbed wire, sort of, and just go right through the ankle going like this. And that, I almost passed out. I had to sit down because I was like, oh, that was awful. And unexpected, too. But that was probably the grossest thing. And I never would have thought I would have seen that in anatomy. So that was probably my grossest experience.
On that note, I think we'll thank Mark, but you should feel free to hang out and chat with him if you want.
Yeah, please do.
I'll just come over and say hi to you guys.